On this episode of Knowledgeable Aging Presents, we talk with Jamie Valvano and hear her heartbreaking yet inspiring story. If the name Valvano rings a bell, her father is Jim Valvano, better known as Jimmy V. This is him winning the 1983 National Basketball Championship while head coach at North Carolina State in his 1993 ESPY speech. Jamie, a breast cancer survivor, has picked up the mantle from her father, who passed away from cancer in 1993 and once spoke of trying to cure cancer by starting the V Foundation for Cancer Research. Now a highly sought-after speaker and advocate, Jamie shares her story with us. Jim Valvano had this larger-than-life personality, a successful basketball coach, sports commentator, and really an inspiration to millions in his battle with cancer. And who can forget the motto, don't give up, don't ever give up. What was Jim Valvano, the father, like?
That's a big question. I think there are many stages of my dad's life that I remember growing up in New York, surrounded by a large Italian family, and every occasion, I mean, if it was just somebody's birthday or a baptism or an anniversary, we were always with the whole Valvano clan. And so those memories are really special to me. Copious amounts of pasta were being cooked in the kitchen, and the cousins were running around, and the men would be just surrounded around this little screen, fighting and yelling about any sporting event that was on. And so those are really my childhood memories. And then we kind of moved forward into moving to North Carolina and watching my dad kind of flourish as a basketball coach. And unfortunately, he was gone a lot during those years because he was recruiting and coaching. And so that was, a completely different time in our lives. But I remember summers vacationing in Atlantic Beach and the Crab Shack and all the fun family times that we had together. And then the last chapter of his life, really me kind of getting to know him not just as a dad but as just this larger than life, as you said, personality that inspired so many. And so I can't even kind of put him into any kind of box because he transcends even just being a dad in my life. There's so many ways that he has touched me and continues to travel this journey with me. So we don't even have enough time for as many memories as I have about my dad.
Take me back, Jamie, to the moment that you found out that your father, or as you called him, your Superman, was diagnosed with cancer.
It was such a shock. He was traveling for work as a sports commentator and having a lot of back pain while he was playing golf. And so he decided, it was July, and he decided that he was going to go and have an MRI scan done. So cancer wasn't even in the realm of possibility. He was 46 years old, and otherwise we felt healthy. And he went and had an MRI done, and right away the radiologist pointed out that the dark spots on his spine were probably cancer. And so then we had further testing and met with an oncologist. And I remember, I can so vividly see the scene right now. My mom and I were in the room with him. It was a doctor we had never met before. And my dad was sitting in the corner on a stool, and he was just sweating profusely. I think we all knew that it just wasn't good news. And the doctor came in and said, Mr. Valvano, you have adenocarcinoma, and probably with the stage that you are at, you probably have about a year to live. And so, to say that we were stunned is just a complete understatement. I don't remember at that moment breaking down and crying or anything, but there was one time throughout the whole 10 months of my dad's last year of his life that I saw him cry. And other than that, he was always perpetually in motion and planning and thinking and dreaming. But yeah, that moment will always stick with me because, just as a daughter, you never think you're going to be, I was 20 at the time, you never think you're going to be privy to something so devastating. And from a stranger. I mean, I remember they asked, "Do you have any questions afterwards?" And you don't even know what to say because he really wasn't given much hope at that time.
So you were, as you had mentioned, you were 20 years old, you were at NC State.
Mhm.
What went into the decision to take on the role of a caregiver?
You know, I think I've always played that role in my family. I'm the middle child. I don't know what that means, but they always say, middle child. I have a sister who is 8 years younger than me. And so she was in middle school, and that's such a difficult, challenging time anyway. My older sister was working and was living on her own, and I was home for the summer. And so it just seemed like the natural role for me to play as kind of that caregiver, not only helping my dad, but also being there for my younger sister, who I adore and am so close to her. And it just felt like it was easy for me to leave school and kind of transition into that position. And my dad really, people probably, nobody knows this, but he never wanted to be alone during those 10 months. That was something that was really challenging for our family. If he was at the hospital, he wanted someone to spend the night. If he was up late watching TV, he wanted someone in the room.
Hmm.
So it really became my mom, myself, other friends, and also my grandmother. His mom was still alive at the time, and so we kind of became this team where we surrounded him at all times, and he kind of was never alone. So I don't think anybody ever asked me to take on that role. I just think because I was already living in the home, and it was just such a natural part of my personality to be a nurturer, that it was something that I just stepped into gladly.
I'd like to stay with the caregiving. I think in society today, the mental health and the physical health of the caregiver, whether it's a professional or personal caregiver, it's often overlooked. So, a kind of a two-part question: how did you take care of yourself, physically and emotionally, and what did you learn about yourself during this time with your father?
Well, what my dad taught me that has served me in so many different areas of my life is, how important it is to have a team around you. As a coach, he always had players and people around him that were helping him. And so really, we we never went a day where we were alone or isolated. Sometimes I thought to myself, really, this is a circus. We have so much going on. Can't we just kind of be alone in our grief and just surround ourselves with family? But my dad, that wasn't his style. He had golfing buddies that came over every day. One of his closest friends who would come and play chess with him. He started painting because he had neuropathy and had trouble with his fingers and sleeping. And so he started painting and would paint at horrible. I mean, they looked like they were paint by numbers. They were terrible. But we had an art show to display the paintings, and the whole neighborhood came over and we all dressed up. So really what my dad taught me in that point is that you can't be alone during these times. And although the team that he assembled, I thought, was primarily for him, it served two purposes, because it allowed my mom and myself as caregivers to have breaks, and also to constantly be surrounded by laughter and fun and life. Because I think when you isolate and it's all about just the treatment or the hospital visits, things like that, it can become really burdensome and overwhelming. But we were never alone. We were never alone. One of my favorite stories is my dad, of course, basketball was his passion, and when he would get treatment at Duke, I was there as a caregiver, but I'll always remember just kind of sneaking away whenever Coach Mike Krzyzewski would show up and they would talk about practice, and my dad would come alive. And so it was really important for me to see that I was part of the team, but I didn't have to do everything. Different people played different roles in his care. And so, there were moments that I stepped up and were precious for me and him to share, but I never felt like it was my total responsibility to be all and everything for him. He had two brothers that I know he really became close to and shared a lot of the more emotional conversations he needed to have. Players would stop by. And so I know that's not for everyone. I know probably my dad is just somebody who feeds off of other people, and some people are saying, gosh, we don't want, this is a difficult time, challenging time. We don't open our doors. But I will say that it's important as a caregiver for you to have a team of your own separate from the patient, where you can talk about what you're experiencing and you can receive love and just kind of be rejuvenated. You cannot make that person your life 24/7. And, whatever it is that excites you, whoever it is that feeds your soul, make sure that you spend time doing that. I really have to tell you that I don't remember. I really remember almost every single day of those 10 months with him being filled with laughter and fun. I mean, it was
That's
just
great.
every day was fun. Doesn't mean there weren't hard, difficult times, but it was filled with so much life. And that's how my dad lived each day. So I'm not really sure it's anything that I did as a caregiver consciously. It was just the gift that my dad gave us throughout his whole life, was to surround us with people to help us know that we were never alone. And so that was such a gift.
Yeah. I'd like to transition a tad, Jamie, to the V Foundation. Now, everybody remembers the SB speech where with ESPN's help, he's going to start the V Foundation for Cancer Research. Can you tell me how that came about?
Yes, this gladly, because most people don't know this story, and they just, they only remember the SB speech moment and think that it was something that was had been planned for so long. And it's amazing. It just shows me the power of one person. So honestly, almost immediately after my dad being diagnosed, he came home, and I remember him sitting in his office, his home office, and he took out a yellow pad and he was jotting down ideas and things and people's names. And I thought, I've seen this before. I have no idea what he's doing. And I remember him picking up the phone and calling all sorts of people. And he just went into coach mode. And he talked about how he wanted to start an organization that would raise money for cancer research. And he talked to his doctors and he talked to researchers that were at Duke Hospital at the time. And he tried to get as much information as he could. But he said, if you're a business person, could you come and be on my team and help me with this? And if you're from entertainment, could you, shed some light on the importance of raising money? And he just talked to anybody that would listen and asked them to join his team. And of course, nobody said no. So when the opportunity came for ESPN and ABC to kind of step up and say, we want to partner with you and do this, my dad had already thought in his mind. He knew he wanted a golf tournament as a fundraiser. He knew who he wanted on the board of directors. He knew where he wanted the money to go, which is so key. So a lot of this, was already set into motion before that night. But we did not have an office. We had no staff. And my dad gets up that night, and I'm in the audience, and I watch him give the speech. And all of a sudden, all this money started coming in, and we thought, oh my gosh, this is a real thing. This people are listening to him, and they want to be on his team. And so really, he's the one who planted the seed, and he's the one who set everything in motion. And what the work that's being done now is all his legacy that he left. It wasn't something that we're doing in his memory. It is something that is being done because he set all of this in motion. And he stood up and, courageously shared his battle and asked all of us to be a part of his team. And that's what we're doing.
Absolutely. You were involved, I will understand, with the V Foundation in the early stages. Is there still any interaction with you with the V Foundation for Cancer Research today?
Yes, I was sitting next to him the night that he gave that SB speech, and I just, can't believe how he got up there and without any preparation spoke those words. And so I was so passionate about the cause, but I was only 20 at the time. And so I returned and graduated from college, from NC State. I became a teacher, an educator, and I saw what the V Foundation was doing. And I just thought to myself, I have to be a part of this. And so I worked at the foundation for probably the first 5 or 6 years of its beginnings and got to really see it explode in such a mighty way and couldn't believe it. But there was part of me that knew that if I stayed at the V Foundation, it was like I was always going to be in my dad's shadow. And, as much as I wanted to be there, I knew that I needed to embrace the path that was for me as well. So I left and actually got married, had 2 boys, and became a teacher again. But all the while through the years, I remained active in the foundation. I would attend events. I would be at our fundraisers, share stories with people, interact with our researchers and our doctors. And then, of course, the V Foundation began to touch me in a even more personal way later in life. But yeah, I still am a huge part of the organization. And what astounds me is that 27 years later, a lot of the same people that my dad asked to be on the board of directors are still part of our team, are still part of our scientific review committee. And so again, it just shows me the power that one person can have when they use their voice and when they ask other people for help. And so, gosh, honestly, I don't want to misspeak the numbers, but it's like $350 million has been raised for cancer research. And last year I actually went and met with some of our V scholars, and I love it because most of them are, international from all over the world. And a lot of them don't even know who Jim Valvano is. They just know the V Foundation. And so I love it. I love that the V Foundation has a respectable and such a great place in the world of cancer research, and it really doesn't have anything to do with college basketball anymore or my dad. So it's amazing. So as a family, we're still very, very involved and very supportive, but it's gotten bigger than anything we ever imagined it would be.
Yeah. You had mentioned your boys. So you have 2 boys. Jake is 20, Grant is 17.
Yes.
I want to talk about Grant. So while you were pregnant, suffered a stroke. Grant suffered a stroke and
Yes.
has cerebral palsy.
Yes.
How early on did you realize that there were some cognitive impairments with Grant?
Well, he was my second son, and so I was 33 or 30 when he was born, actually, and I had a 3-year-old son already, so I kind of knew a little bit about the development. And almost immediately, I noticed that Grant was not tracking with his eyes. That was our first indication that maybe something was wrong. And I remember going to the doctor and them saying, kids develop at different rates. Don't worry about it. Go home. Made me feel silly as a young mother. But I knew instinctively that something was going on with him. And luckily in the area that we live, we have such great hospitals and doctors. So I took him to a pediatric ophthalmologist, and they noticed that he had optic nerve damage, which led them to think that there was some brain damage, and a scan was done. And so we really knew at about 3 to 4 months that he had suffered an ischemic stroke or a brain bleed, and they never could tell us why it had happened. They did every test possible and imaginable, and there's nothing wrong with me or him as far as bleeding or clotting issues. Otherwise, he's healthy. They believe it happened very late in the pregnancy, and they said it could be something as simple as a cold that made a vessel burst or something to that effect. And so then the first year of his life was basically just doctor's appointments, more testing, and them continuing to uncover more things that were wrong with him. And they used words, like optic nerve hypoplasia and cerebral palsy and developmental delay and special needs, and all these words I had never heard to describe my perfect child. And it really put a lot of stress on my health and on my just every relationship I had. And unlike my dad's lesson that he had taught me, I forgot how important team is. And I really isolated because as a young mother, all of my friends were having these healthy, beautiful children, and nobody could relate to me. Nobody that I knew had a child with special needs. And so I really isolated and became very, very alone. And that was not the right choice for me to make looking back now. But it was, as his mom, I thought it was my responsibility to fix him and to go to all these appointments they told me, and occupational therapy and physical therapy. And my whole life was just kind of taken away from me in an instant. And I just did not deal with it very well at all. And so it was definitely a difficult, dark time in my life. And I was really sad that my dad couldn't be there to help me, because I knew he would find a way to inspire me and make it okay.
if you don't mind, I'd like to talk a little bit more. You're very open about that time when you were trying to fix Grant. What did you mean when you said you were trying to fix Grant?
Oh, it was, you know, it's really hard. Anybody who deals with an illness, whether it's a child with special needs or an illness that you've had yourself, a lot of times after the crisis is over, everybody else goes back to normal. After we knew what was wrong with him, and and I say wrong with him again, I was in a bad place during that time, and I've learned now that there's nothing wrong with Grant, but he wasn't typically developing, and people were just giving me all these diagnoses and therapies that needed to happen. And with a child, early intervention is very important. And so they really want you to get in there early and attack everything. And so my, husband at the time went back to work. My mom went back to her life. Everybody kind of went back to living, their in their world. And I was left. I was the person who had to go to all these appointments and sit in these waiting rooms and deal with all of this heartbreaking news. And all I could think about was that if I just did enough research, if I found the right book, if there was I remember thinking to myself, I mean, this is how insane I am, where I thought he needed to be in a hyperbaric oxygen chamber. And
Oh,
I think anybody who deals with any type of illness, that's what we do. We get out there, we look on the internet, we talk to other people, we do research, and we go off into these crazy tangents of, this is what I need to do. And so in my mind, I remember somebody asking me, what would it take for you to accept Grant just the way he is, allow all of this to unfold as it should? And in my just complete ignorance, I said nothing. Unless my child is perfect, I'm not going to be okay. And so there was this unspoken burden that I put on myself that, I was going to make it so that my child was going to be typically developing normal, was not going to have special needs. I just completely rejected that notion. And because of that, I missed so much just loving him and enjoying him. And it really took another tragedy to occur in my life before I realized how stupid I really was
yeah.
that I was not mothering the way that I should. So yeah, I openly acknowledge that. And it's not just, I want to say, it's not just parents of kids who have, are outside of typically developing realm. As a teacher, I would see parents come in all the time with their children wanting to fix things. My kid is too hyper, or my child, isn't good enough at math, or can you help with this? And I always just sat there just in complete awe and wanted to just hug these parents and say, we are not the authors of our children's stories. We are not the ones that make every single decision. They are human beings, not robots. And can you sit back and take a breath and just enjoy them and allow them to just become? And I just think we just live in a society where we want everything really
Yeah.
fast and we want solutions. And so my heart breaks for any parent that is struggling with with their children, because I know what it's like to feel like that burden is all on your shoulders.
Yeah. Let's fast forward 3 years, or
Yeah.
from you're 33 years old, you
Yes.
find a lump, in your breast. Take me to that instant. And did you at all think to yourself, Jamie, that, oh my gosh, my father had cancer, did you draw any parallel at that, just at that instant when you found out, or anything?
Well, leading up until, so my dad's cancer, a lot of people don't know that they never found the origin of his
Okay.
cancer at the time. It had spread everywhere. People think he had bone cancer, but nobody at the time in 1993 said to us, this is genetic. You guys need to get tested. He was a man, I'm a woman. He didn't, although he had cancer in his family, really at that time, they didn't really talk a lot about that, like, what's your history? And so again, we didn't go forward thinking, oh, there's this dark cloud over our family now, and we've all got to deal with this. We had no idea. So my two sisters and I, we just go on with life. We really don't, think about anything. And I don't ever remember doing anything preventative as far as, I mean,
Okay.
it certainly didn't smoke and lived a healthy life, but I don't remember thinking to myself, okay, I have to make sure that I don't get cancer. I will say the 3 years that I was raising my son, I was constantly sick. I was constantly under the weather. At one point, they thought I had an autoimmune disease. My blood work was always all over the place. It is unbelievable what stress can do to our bodies, you know,
It's true.
mentally and physically. And there was just so much anxiety that I was under at the time. Looking back, you know, it was just a recipe for disaster. But yes, I'm sitting in my bed at 33 and I noticed that there's a lump in my breast, very, very small. It was like 1 centimeter, moved around. And I went to the doctor and they said, don't worry about it. It's probably something to do, you know, with hormones. And so I felt like I had gotten it checked out. But again, something inside me, just like with Grant, whispered, no, you've got to
Yeah.
consult somebody else. And um, I called my dad's oncologist on a Friday, Dr. Joe Moore from Duke Cancer Center, and I told him that, and he said, okay, we'll get you in to get a biopsy right away or whatever. They skipped a mammogram, they went right to an ultrasound. And I remember going to the place and the person who had looked at the ultrasound closing the door behind me. And I thought that's not a
Oh,
good sign. So I think there was not a lot of time for me to think about, could this be cancer? It just started, the movement of the appointments and the going to get the test. So then I went from the ultrasound to the biopsy. And I remember a stranger again called me at home with the biopsy results and said, you have breast cancer. And so at that point, then starts a meeting with an oncologist, a meeting with a surgeon, it just the cycle starts. But had I not listened to my inner voice and just let it go, who knows what would have happened, because I, at 33, had never had a mammogram and I had never been told that I was at risk. So there weren't any tests that I was, doing on a regular basis that would have revealed this.
yeah. So the BRCA2 was relatively new
Yeah.
in the mid 90s. So this, I mean, your doctors, I'm sure you were kind of learning as they were learning to some degree. What did you learn about this genetic mutation?
It was tough. I joke to people now, because it's been 14 years, that I was a trendsetter, because the Angelina Jolie and Christina Applegate and all of these beautiful
Yeah.
women now come forward to talk about BRCA2 and BRCA1, but it's like nobody really wanted to hear about it when I got diagnosed, because it had not even been discovered when my dad was
Yeah.
diagnosed with his cancer. So, again, to talk about the divine is just, it's amazing. So the gentleman who had been a fellow under my dad's oncologist, his name is Paul Kelly Markham, and he, over the 13 years since my dad's diagnosis, had taken a position as the head of genetic breast cancer at Duke Hospital Cancer Center. So talk about, somebody you want to get involved with. So I immediately had an appointment with him. And again, the original oncologist as well as the surgeon said, at this point in the year that I was diagnosed in 2005, there was such a small percentage that they were attributing to genetic.
Hmm.
And so really at that time they said, oh, it's not going to be genetic. Don't worry about it. You're going to have a lumpectomy. You won't even probably have to have chemo. It was just like easy peasy. Everybody was, and then all of a sudden they call me in and I meet with a geneticist, and Dr. Moore was the one who had pushed to do the genetic testing. And because he had that knowledge and that expertise, so I just was very fortunate. I would not have known to ask for genetic testing because I certainly didn't think my dad had had breast cancer. So again, nothing was
Yeah.
clicking yet at the
Yeah.
time. Nothing really was hitting. And then basically they had me do a family tree and they tested me, my mom, and my sisters. And everybody was negative but me. And they sat down, and at the time, the woman gave me an envelope. She slid it across the table. And as I opened it up, it basically told me, what gene it was that had been identified that had the mutation. And then it told me the percentages of increase of every other type of cancer that now I was at risk for. And then once again, the question was
Whew.
posed, do you have any questions? And you're
No,
just
not at all,
like,
right?
I,
Yeah.
I
No,
don't
no,
know.
I'm
At
good.
3, I don't, what does this mean?
Right.
And initially, what it meant, because you can only take one step at a time, you can't look at the whole picture yet, or you'll get overwhelmed, was that my simple procedure went from, a lumpectomy to now at 33, we've got to be really aggressive with you because your percentages of having breast cancer in the other breast, as well as having ovarian cancer, have just gone, through the roof. And so we've got to be very, very aggressive. All of a sudden, it got really serious. And because of that, um, I felt that there was no chance that I would survive because I felt that because I had the gene, got it from my dad, and my dad had died, that therefore that was my fate. That's how I interpreted it because the gene overrode any type of other information they were giving me. So, that's really what the gene did at the time because I didn't know anybody else who had the gene. Nobody. I mean, I really did not know anybody. Um, and so I really felt like that was it. Like, even if I could survive the breast cancer, now you're talking about ovarian cancer and colon cancer and skin cancer. And I thought, well, there's no way. There's no way. And I really kind of gave up pretty early in the treatment plan once I received that news.
I'd like to talk a little bit more about the role as a caregiver with your father. So were you able to incorporate some of the experiences from that in being with your father as you now started your battle in treatment with cancer and as it affected the real-time decisions and actions that you would make? Was there any type of a parallel for you with what your father had and what you had and as you went forward?
Yeah, I definitely think that um, it took me a while. I was really, really angry at my dad. And, that's something that's difficult for me to share because I love him so much and miss him so much, but I was really angry. I mean, I was mad. People would come up to me and say early in my my treatment and diagnosis, "Don't give up, don't ever give up." And I'd want to punch him in the face because I was like, "Really? Like this is I had been such a good daughter. I had taken care of my dad. I'd been a wonderful caregiver, and this is my, gift that I get is, cancer. I couldn't believe it. And I felt very isolated from my mom and my sisters and my family because I just felt very picked upon. Um, and at the time, I had a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old son who still wasn't even walking, who had special needs. And I just feel as if it was pretty soon in my diagnosis. Probably I had started chemo and had lost my hair. And I would look in the mirror and I felt like I was kind of morphing into my dad. I remembered what he looked like at the end of his battle and kind of what he dealt with. And I just felt like that's like the persona that I was taking on. And I tell this story often, but I was sitting at the kitchen table crying. My mom was at the sink, and just a off comment because we all have different ways of coping. My mom's solution to any problem she believes is just that you need to clean your house. Basically, she is not quite the same inspiring person my dad is. Her inspiration comes from cleaning. And so every day she would show up at my house and she would just say, well, how about we rearrange your closet, or how about we, do your sock drawer? And I would be like, Mom, really? Like, that's not going to help me. But that's all she knew to do. I mean, she had watched her husband go through the same path and down the same road, and now she was having to watch her daughter. And my mom was just devastated. And so I'm sitting at the table and she's doing dishes or cleaning the kitchen as she usually did. And I just decided I was going to give up. I thought to myself, I'll go ahead and do the treatment, but I can't do this anymore. I can't pretend to be my dad. Everybody wanted me to take on his role and to be inspiring and to not give up and to just, I mean, it was just terrible. And I just felt like saying, I'm not him, and I can't be positive about all of this. And just falling apart. I remember every appointment I would go to, I would just cry the whole time. I was a complete mess. Nobody would ever make like a Lifetime movie about my battle with cancer because it would just be like one actress sitting in a ball crying all at all times because that's all I did. But in that moment, I heard my dad's voice. And, you mentioned this before. He said, we're starting the V Foundation for Cancer Research. It may not save my life. It may save my children's lives. It may save someone you love. And it was like I heard him sitting right next to me in that moment. And, I can't make this up because it truly happened. And I thought to myself in that moment, what would your dad do with another year? They're telling you that you can survive, and you're deciding this is just too hard. How dare you? I kind of got mad at myself, and I had never heard those words quite the way that I did at that moment. Like I could recite the ESPY speech, but I had always thought it was for someone else. And I realized in that moment that my dad took that stage and gave that speech for me. I was the someone he loved. I was the someone that he wanted to save. And he didn't even know. I mean, he'd prophetically spoken those words, not knowing that I sat in the audience, already having a gene inside of me that he had given to me. And so I really decided in that moment that was transformative for me. And what I did instantly was I started to assemble a team. And I was bold. So many times when we're suffering and when we're in pain, we don't want to ask people for help because we feel like, well, they have a lot going on and I don't want to intrude on their life. But I was just, I asked anyone. I asked my mom to go to treatment with me, my younger sister, who I had taken care of when she was in middle school, now moved home. As a young woman, she left her life and came home to take care of my children. And she stayed with us for about 3 or 4 months while I went through chemo. And my other sister took me to treatment. I had neighbors who delivered food. My 75-year-old grandma, I would be like, Gigi, get in the laundry room right now and do a load of whites. I put her to work. There was just nobody who was immune to me asking for help. I remember my mornings were particularly tough, and I would wake up and dream about being healthy and then see my reflection in the mirror. So I asked my college roommate, Christine, if she'd call me every morning at 6:45 to kind of get me up and moving because I still wanted to be a mom. And she was instrumental as being a part of my team. And just like those people who my dad asked, there wasn't anyone who said no. Everybody said, yes, we want to be there for you because they loved me, but they didn't know how to help. And so I really was bold in asking for what I needed. And it doesn't mean that the journey was any easier. It was still difficult and I still wanted to give up, but I allowed myself to be loved and carried and cared for by other people. And sometimes that's harder than being the caretaker. Sometimes it's easier to be the one that is helping and in charge and directing, especially for those type A personality peoples. We just love a to-do list. And it's hard to be still and to know that all I needed to do was heal and to accept love. And that's what I did. And that's what I am still doing 14 years later. But that's what was instrumental really was, me deciding that I could take my dad's hand. I had to forgive him, and my ending could be different than his, and I could allow him to show me what it would mean to be a survivor. And he still walks that journey with me today.
You're in your mid-30s. You've been a caregiver. You watched your father in his battle with cancer, your son with special needs, your battle now with cancer. You're a survivor. What changed with you with regards to your role as a mother?
When people ask me how I did refuse to give up, my boys definitely were kind of the reason why. I remember someone asking me, what would it take for you to be okay with Grant just as he is and not struggle every single day? And I realized very quickly after my diagnosis, the only thing worse than being a cancer patient was not being there to raise my children. I really wanted to see my sons grow up. And so I remember one of the visions, I call it my cutting down the nets moment, because my dad always worked to cut down the nets. And my cutting down the nets was to see my son Jake graduate from high school. He was 5 at the time of my diagnosis. And I wanted to be there for his graduation. And I wanted to be there to see Grant walk and become who he was meant to be. And so almost immediately, my idea of mothering changed. And I decided that every day it was just about enjoying my boys. There were no rules anymore, and there were no regulations, and everything didn't need to be about, trying to solve some sort of problem. It was more just, how can I love these children, and how can I celebrate them, who they are. And so once again, it was all about a team of people. I, for the first time, realized I needed to let more people into Grant's life. And there were therapists, occupational therapists, and physical therapists, and speech therapists. And there were doctors that would come in, and special needs teachers. And there was one doctor who really stands out, and his name was Dr. Gordon Morley, and he was a developmental pediatrician. And it looks like he had done the job for probably like 150 years. I mean, he just looked like he had always been in that hospital, and he had such a way of almost dismissing the parents. It was all about the children, and he would just talk to them and interact with them. And I remember one particular time crying to him and just having a complete breakdown, and asking him, what kind of life is Grant going to have if he doesn't walk, if he doesn't talk? What are we doing here? I just really needed some type of encouragement. And he got really just quiet and still, and he looked at me and he said, listen, Grant is going to have an extraordinary life. It might not be the one you imagined for him, but it's going to be extraordinary. And I wish I could tell you I believed it right away, but he planted a seed inside of me. It's just amazing how at the right time a person speaks those words that you need and encourages you. And so I started to just be more open to seeing the extraordinary. I think it's always there, but oftentimes we focus so much on what's missing, the deficit, our needs. We're constantly focused on all of that. And so I decided I'm going to pay attention really closely to and celebrate what Grant does each and every day, and realize that it's a journey. It's not going to happen overnight. And slowly he started to really do things that they had never imagined he would. And I really recognize that the brain is an amazing thing, and that it has the ability to create new neuropathways. And these doctors would explain things to me, and they would say to me, looking at his MRI or CT scan, he shouldn't be able to do what he's doing, but he's doing it. So let's just move forward. And so I kind of took off that heavy burden that I had as his mom, and said, you know what? It's the doctors, it's the therapists, it's the people creating his plans at school. I'll do what they ask me to do, but I'm his mom. It's my job to love him, and to celebrate him, and to believe in him. And I think Grant changed me more than I've ever changed or affected him. He's taught me so much over the past 17 years of his life, and continues to do so. But once again, that team came to the rescue for me. And remembering you cannot isolate during those times of need. You have to reach out and ask for help. And if the people that you're surrounding yourself with, your family with, that was one thing that I definitely want to say, is you have the ability to decide who gets to be on your team. So many times people think, well, that doctor's horrible, or that my neighbor really is a bummer, or my aunt, every time I talk to her, she brings me down. And what my dad taught me is that some people need to sit on the bench. They're not part of the starting five. And so I have surrounded myself with people in Grant's life, in my life, in my other son's life. Like, if they are not a part of a united team, and they don't see the ultimate vision, that doctor who spoke those words, he was an MVP. I mean, he went to the top of the list. If he told me Grant was going to be extraordinary, I wanted him on my team. And so really choose wisely who you allow to impact you on your journey. And if people don't see the impossible that can happen, then maybe you need to select some new people. You need to red shirt or trade that person or kick them off your team, I guess.
I got to stop you right there.
That's harsh.
I I've known you for a long time, Jamie, and I know you're not a sports person, but you are really trying with the red shirt and all those. You are doing a wonderful job here. I mean, I'm really proud of you.
My dad would be so proud of me because I know this much about sports. But I do from recruiting, from watching him recruit. I knew he would, he would recruit with intention. And I really never realized that. I was always one of those people who just wanted to be nice and sure, you can be a part of our play group or sure you can. I don't want to tell that doctor that I don't want him to be my doctor anymore. And it's like, what? You get to pick your team. Come on now.
That's excellent. That's
It's
excellent.
true.
So I'd like to talk about Grant if you don't mind. So I've got a T-shirt on which you sent to me. Talk to me about Grant and what you've seen and where he is today. I mean, he's got his own YouTube page. We were talking yesterday. He's out there doing burpees. Considering what you were told potentially about your son or the fears you had as a young mother to where he is 17 years later. Can you talk about this?
Yeah, what Grant has shown me is that sometimes the very things that we think are going to destroy us are exactly what we need in order to save us. And Grant has saved me because he's just taught me so many things. He enabled me to get really still and to live a simple life in that Grant's purpose every single day is he wakes up and he says, who can I love today? Or how can I love people today? And he has cerebral palsy on the left side of his body, his left arm and obviously left leg is affected. He has developmental delays. He has vision issues, but there's something extraordinary about him that it has come to pass in that I see the way in which he loves people and how he just approaches life every day, especially in the midst of all that's going on right now. My son does not know hate. He doesn't know prejudice. He doesn't know jealousy. He doesn't know really envy or anger. He really, and people say, well, it's because he has special needs. No, I think it's because the way that he looks at the world and his perspective is that every person deserves to be loved, and he is just absolutely amazing, and he has this joy, this childlike joy that we all should have, where he knows what he loves to do, and he makes sure every day that he does those things. He says, I love music, so I'm going to listen to music and dance, or I'd like to do puzzles. I mean, how many of us don't spend time doing what makes us joyful because we're too busy? And Grant's not about that. He just is such an encouragement to everybody. And one of the challenges that I did have with him, however, was there weren't a lot of programs as he got older of things for him to be a part of. And it would either be something where, he wasn't interested in it, or he was too old, or he, didn't fit the requirements. And so I really struggled as a mom and felt very alone as other people were going to soccer games and involved with sports with their kids, and my older son was in the choir. And, I was like, what does Grant need? He needs to find a passion. And I didn't know how to find it for him. And so my older son was going to college, and I really noticed that Grant's dad is very athletic and very muscular and into sports and everything. And I think we both never knew what to get Grant involved in. And so I decided that I was going to hire a personal trainer to work with him. And I was referred to a gentleman by the name of Daniel Ellis, who's in his 30s and just, this stocky, muscular guy. And he walked in the first day to meet us, and I proceeded to overshare and tell him, because I was going to work out with him as well, that, I was out of shape, slightly depressed, cancer survivor, and my son was handicapped, and and he looked at me like, what am I going to do with these two people? I have no idea. But since then, I've even created blogs and stories to tell people the friendship that formed between these two, my son Grant and this man Daniel, once again proved that the power of one person, that when someone believes in you, it's amazing what can happen. And just like that doctor all those years ago, Daniel believes that Grant can do anything, that he can be extraordinary. And so over the past 2.5 years, my son went from not being able to really squat or I mean, he really didn't even know how to do any exercises or do a push-up to now running, jumping, cheering other people on. And so early on in our workouts, he got this phrase from he would do a countdown, and he would say 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then we would start the exercise. And then he got this phrase "bam" from a Disney show, and so it morphed into 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, but bam, do what you can. And Daniel and I were so moved by it as we shared, and he says it every time we work out, and it started to catch on with people because, ba-bam, we all want to live a ba-bam life, and Grant does live a ba-bam life, and he's identified what that means, but also doing what you can every single day instead of focusing on what he can't do. Grant just does what he can, and he does it with 100% effort and passion and excitement. And it's really, in a short amount of time, it's kind of changed everything. He now has kind of a divine mission and path and journey. And people tell me all the time when I post videos, they see him working so hard and it inspires them to do what they can in their life. It's amazing.
Yeah, well, as you know, I have the shirt, so I ordered the shirt online, and talk about touching. Here's a handwritten note from Grant, and it says how to live a BAM life, and he has 5 things he's written out. Do your best, never give up, love people, be kind, get healthy, love, Grant, Matthew, Howard.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, that brings tears. It brought tears in my eyes this morning when I opened it. I'm like, oh my goodness. Like you said, he just wants to love. And when you see that, you just realize, wow.
Yes. Yes. And he's really what, it kind of, when you talk about where I was compared to where I am now, I just know that every single day I look at those 5 things and they're so simple, and I ask myself, am I doing those 5 things? And so it's amazing how, Grant has become kind of my leader. And people that see him that remember my dad always say, he has a little bit of that don't give up spirit in him. And I just know that my dad would be right there, high-fiving and celebrating with us because, Grant is showing us the right way to live. What truly matters right now is, being kind, loving people, doing your best, and being healthy in mind, body, and spirit. And that's really all we can do. We can't control the circumstances of everything that's going around in the world right now, but we can every single day make a choice to live that BAM life, to believe that extraordinary things can happen, and to not give up. And that's, just really what we do in our house every single day.
That's wonderful. So I want to talk about where you are now. So to me, I mean, like I said in the opening, you've picked up the mantle from your father, and you now are, to me, you're Jamie Valvano, the advocate and the speaker. Talk to me about what moves you now? What makes you go?
Easy, without a doubt, people. I, a couple years ago, decided I was going to leave teaching and start traveling and speaking, and really acknowledging that my dad had left this amazing legacy, and there were footsteps that I wanted to walk in, and there was the next chapter that I wanted to tell. Whether you even know who Jim Valvano is or not, when I stand up on a stage and I tell the story of what we've just talked about, and his legacy and what I want to do now for my own children, people are inspired because every single person is surviving something. And there isn't a day that goes by that somebody doesn't reach out to me and say, this is the struggle that I'm dealing with. This is the obstacle that I'm overcoming. And seeing your video or watching your dad's SB speech, or, just hearing about something that you're doing in the community was inspirational. And, the only reason I think that people are inspired is because I'm just authentically sharing my journey and trying to love people and trying to be kind and listen to where they are. And so really, before COVID, I traveled and spoke all of the time. Now I'm kind of doing everything virtually, but
Like right now.
now more than ever,
Yeah.
because of this virtual world, people are feeling very disconnected and alone. And it's hard in a Zoom meeting to tell your boss or to tell a coworker, I'm struggling, I'm feeling alone, or I'm isolated, or I'm having a hard time teaching my kids. Or so now more than ever, people, really need authenticity. They, need to hear what it is that other people are doing to inspire them, their families and others, and how they can embrace their extraordinary. And so that's really what I do, is I share that with whatever group invites me to speak to them. I chuckle because I speak to pharmaceutical companies, and I speak at sports things, and I'll also speak to financial groups, and I think, what do all these people have in common, and why do they want to listen to me? And what I realize, it's because we're all just craving, we all have that human desire to feel significant and to know that what we're doing in life has an impact on other people, and to just have that connection. And so really, it's, that's what I do, is I just show people how, what have I learned over the past 48 years, not only in my own life, but also from meeting such amazing people like Jim Valvano and like Grant Howard, and people that are on our board at the V Foundation, and just the people that I'm able to interact with is really the biggest blessing right now. And that's what keeps me going, knowing that there have been so many people along my journey that changed my course forever simply by speaking words of truth and love over me. And so if I can be that person, if for someone else, if I can plant a seed in you and let you know that it is too soon to quit and you cannot give up, and you are an ordinary person, but you can live an extraordinary life. And if I can let you see into my brokenness, and then also witness the victory, then that's what it's all about. I mean, I think that's the legacy that I want to leave behind.
Last question, Jamie. I'd like you to kind of envision a younger version of yourself next to you. If you could give her a hug, what would you tell her?
There may have been a day when I would have been critical of her, but looking back, I would just tell her how proud I am of the fact that she didn't give up. And I would just say, good job, give her a high five and a hug. And I'm just proud of, where we are today, and so thankful that she decided not to throw in the towel.